Hello, you're listening to OMG Extra, your extra dose of MotoGP with former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Huewen and myself, Amy Reynolds. After a 3-week break, MotoGP is back in action this week at perhaps the most historical circle left now on the calendar, Keith, the TT Circuit Asen. It's always a good one to visit. It's actually, again, I mean, like we say this all the time, but it is really one for your bucket list if you're a MotoGP fan, just because of the history, really.
Yeah, the cathedral of, I can't even say it, cathedral of speed. It's changed incarnation-wise over the years. Obviously, it was a road circuit, were much bigger once back in the day, but then they shortened it to what we all thought of as the proper Asen racetrack. And it's been shortened even more. That first couple of turns is fairly Mickey Mouse in comparison to where it was before. But forget all about that. That was then, this is now. Everybody looks forward to Asen. The final sector, Asen, there is nowhere else like it. The opportunities that can be created through those fast corners leading down to the final chicane are just spectacular. And of course, the Dutch get right behind it. And they've got a lot to look forward to at the moment. I mean, they've got a new young kid that's coming good, Colin Veyer, in the smaller classes at the moment. So watch out for him. He's emerging as well. We're still getting loads of information regarding people shifting teams. But the big one this morning that Sky Italia have gone with, the Sky Television outfit in Italy, is that Pramac have done the deal with Yamaha. So no more a Ducati team. It's looking like they, for 2025, will be a Yamaha team. That, for me, is not so much about Pramac, it's about Yamaha. Yamaha with a decent satellite team, the likes of Pramac, who are a brilliant outfit, running Yamahas. That has got to be a big deal for Yamaha there. And they then will have 4 bikes on the grid, which they need if they're going to go anywhere. If they're going to make that data work, they need that kind of big team like Pramac, a capable team like Pramac, to push them forward.
Keith, everybody's going to be asking, though, why on earth would you leave the most successful bike on the grid for potentially the second to last bike on the grid?
I get your point,
fair?
and I get everybody else's point. I often point back to Formula One in these things when, Mercedes, Hamilton signed for Mercedes when Mercedes wasn't a particularly good team. If you can go to Brawn, wasn't a particularly good team when it was run by Honda and then won the World Championship the next year. Things change. We're getting to the point now where the Yamaha is not a slow motorcycle. It's just not a complete package at the moment. When you bear in mind that the whole grid's covered by only a second, we're talking about the tiniest nuances to make this work. And another team coming on board at this point. The Neil Spaulding interview that we did here on OMG a few weeks ago, I mean, Neil was pretty adamant that Honda will be back, Yamaha will be back. These things ebb and flow a little bit. The Japanese have found themselves caught on the back foot massively. Yamaha, for me, their management have always been a bit slow in the uptake, I always think. I just think that even compared with Honda, I think Yamaha are a slower operation to grab the ball by the horns and make the investment. But then when you see what they've done, signed Quartararo again, making an effort, Yamaha are, I think we speculated whether Yamaha would stay in the game and do a Suzuki at one point. I think that was around the world, people were considering that might be a Yamaha course of action. But in the end, Yamaha have thrown the kitchen sink at this. They've made a massive effort. So Yamaha are on their way back. I have every confidence they will make their way back. And so therefore, this could be a very smart move, to answer your question, that Pramac have made. Maybe they're getting a team on the up, perhaps, as opposed to a team that's kind of leveled out at the moment. When these new rules packages come out as well, will that play towards Yamaha's output? In as much as, again, Neil Spaulding has said that, if you've got a completely redesigned motor, because we've got smaller engines now, 850s, which means they're going to be a bit narrow, which when you've got an across-the-frame 4-cylinder bike as opposed to a V4, that works. It gives you that little bit extra from an engineering point of view. So, Yamaha are clearly not done with. Yamaha are clearly making the moves, and now they've got Pramac on board as well. I think it's a great move for Yamaha. Whether it will be for Pramac or not, as you allude to, we'll find out.
Well, although there's been no racing action over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of news. The Pramac to Yamaha story being one of the most recent. But on a previous episode where you had Simon Crafar, you already discussed the big news that really kicked off this 3-week break off, which was that Jorge Martin signed with Aprilia, which then meant we learned that Marc Marquez will partner Francesco Bagnaia at the factory Ducati squad. Since then, there's been a bit more news just to catch you back up on if you have missed it. Enea Bastianini and Maverick Vinales will be in orange at Red Bull KTM Tech 3. Just to pick the bones out of that one a little bit, Keith, it seems like a little bit of a throw his toys out of the pram move from Maverick Vinales, or would you say it's more of a business one?
I think a change is as good as a rest. I mean, maybe he was pushed a little bit. I mean, Aprilia found themselves with 2 brand new riders in their full factory team. Trackhouse are obviously looking to try and retain Raul Fernandez and Miguel Oliveira, unless Joe Roberts gets his foot in the door there as an American in the American Trackhouse team for Aprilia. So it looks like their satellite team may well be stable. But the main factory team now has got 2 brand spanking new riders, Bezzecchi, obviously, and Jorge Martin. Now, Bezzecchi, interesting story there, because basically Bezzecchi's done not very much on the Ducati this year. The year before, he looked brilliant. And if we consider where he was last year here at Asen, I mean, he won the sprint race and he was somewhere, he finished second, I think it was, in the main race as well. So Bezzecchi last year was really on it at Asen. And maybe now that contractually he's in the Aprilia team, perhaps he'll relax. Perhaps Asen's a kind of track that you get flow, and it's kind of one of those old school racetracks with a crown in the middle of the road in places and the like. Maybe we'll see the best of Bezzecchi in 2024 starting this weekend.
It'd be weird for him to just tail off and go quiet, because he's been there. So we'll see what he does for the rest of the year. But there's a number of riders that really have got to turn it up for this second part of the season. And some of the kind of fallout from those big announcement moves, obviously, is Jack Miller. Jack Miller's, the start of the season, hasn't won him a ride in that KTM box. And now he's going to be on the hunt for a new seat. But
reading between the lines, I think, Amy, I mean, you'll have done exactly the same thing this morning, I see Jack Miller was quoted as saying something along the lines of, I haven't burnt any bridges in any of the teams, which is pretty rare for a rider, actually, because normally they are slightly less politically correct than most. He hasn't burnt any bridges. Now, for that, I read in my mind that perhaps the orange bike might suit him a little bit. Maybe there's a little bit in Repsol, perhaps at Honda or something along those lines. He hasn't burnt bridges. What bikes are going to be available? What teams are going to be perhaps benefiting from Jack's presence? The downside is I don't recall in my mind Jack being a super duper development rider. He's a sort of, excuse the expression, a balls out racer, with the old Aussie determination. And I love that. He's the kind of, he falls into the Binder, Aleix Espargaro kind of category of bite the screen and give it as much as you can give it. I love Jack for that. And I love he's a great team member.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to see where to place him at this moment in time. I think he'll get a ride. And it'll be interesting to see whether he can pick something from that, whether he can make that work for him.
I mean, he's ridden Honda before, albeit a very, very long time ago now, but he is still, I mean, you forget actually how young Jack Miller is, because he joined MotoGP so young. And we say he's not a development rider. I think KTM have really credited him and been able to bring that information across from Ducati. He's not done yet. He's not done yet in MotoGP. However, you have to worry for the likes of Augusto Fernandez, because where will he go?
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? And you're going to get it every year. There's a very small grid. There's only 22 bikes on the grid, 24 sometimes. There's not a lot of room out there, and there's a lot of bloody good motorbike racers that are all vying for the position. And as I said earlier on, within a second of each other. And I think it's only going to get worse or better, depending on which viewpoint you're looking at. Jack Miller, it would be a massive loss to the paddock. And I mean, the reason why Jack was so young when he was in MotoGP, because he jumped Moto2. He just came straight from Moto3 straight into MotoGP. He didn't even touch the Moto2 bikes. So he managed to sort of bypass a couple of years in the middle class. He has a habit of turning things around, I think, Jack. I think that he is capable of turning things around. We've seen him do it before. When he bulked up and put a bit of fat on, he wasn't quite as fit as he probably should have been. Then he turns up the next minute and he looks like somebody that, could knock the hell out of somebody. I love Jack Miller. This paddock would not be a great place without him, of course. So I wish him really, really well. I really do. And his family's great as well. To have his family on trackside, I mean, they're just the whole lot of them. You want a night out, that's the team you're going out with.
There are about, sorry to keep on harping on about, silly season and things like that, but the reason I circle back to this, there's about 10 riders at the moment that have all got to find out within the next few months where their future lies. And one of them being currently at a team we've just touched on, Pramac. Now, Franco Morbidelli has obviously left Yamaha, gone to Pramac, on the Ducati. The start of the season, we think, was mired by a preseason injury just before the year got going. But because of the years he's coming off on, we've got to remember that Franco Morbidelli, I think it was 2020, was runner-up in the World Championship on the Yamaha. And then I think it was a knee injury he had, but for whatever reason, he just never really came back. He showed a little bit of promise in the last couple of races. But do you think that Franco Morbidelli is going to keep that seat in Pramac, Keith?
No, I don't. Will he end up going back to VR46 or something? Back under the umbrella there or something along those lines. I don't know. I mean, Franco Morbidelli, to be honest, he's one of the most intelligent, most talented riders on the grid that hasn't made it work for him, and particularly after that injury, it took him a long time to get back into the groove. After that, and he will be lucky to land. There's a lot of people in the marketplace, and of course we've had one or two come up from Moto2 as well, which has made it even more difficult for existing MotoGP riders. At the moment, it's a team's marketplace. They pretty much can slot people where they want to. I mean, you mentioned KTM a moment ago. KTM have a plan. KTM are quite ruthless when it comes to making it work. Gas will drop off the edge now, so it'll be badged as a proper KTM, not as a gas at Tech 3. It's going to be full factory bikes as well, which is going to make the difference. They've stepped up. We've talked about in past episodes of OMG the timeline it takes to get full factory kit. It's not just a case of providing a motorcycle. It's all the development parts that come with that. Engineering takes a long time to line up and get those parts out and onto the track. So to suddenly go from 2 full factory bikes to 4 full factory bikes is a massive commitment. And I think that we're going to see quite a bit of that over the next. And of course, the problem is that you've got a double-edged engineering problem coming up in 2025 because, at what point do you stop developing what you got and start developing what you want for 2027? There have been calls in the MSMA, if I remember rightly, to try and stop that, to halt that development, in 2026. So they got a chance. The budgets that it takes to develop complete newly engineered motorbikes is huge, absolutely huge. And motorbike racing isn't like Formula One. It does not have that massive, great checkbook. At the end of the day, it's a motorcycle class, so therefore it couldn't have. But really, it's going to be the next couple of 3 years are going to be the most expensive times that any MotoGP team has ever known.
Well, over the coming weeks, I'm sure we'll have more news to discuss on where riders are going. There are quite a few high-profile names that you have to wonder where their future lies. But moving on to this weekend, it is the 75th Grand Prix at Asen. As we touched on at the top, the most historical venue on the calendar, always provides a good bit of racing. The championship is perfectly poised. Jorge Martin still actually leads Francesco Bagnaia by 18 points. But currently, it's Pecco that is on the most recent win streak. And he's got a bit of a special affinity with Asen. He even has a tattoo of the circuit on his arm.
Well, it's the first place he won a Grand Prix in Moto3. So, he's had, I think, 4 wins there in the classes, and he'll be looking for his 5th win this weekend. But, I mean, when you win your first Grand Prix, no matter what class it is, that's a big deal. So to have a tattoo, I can understand that. It's probably why I don't have any tattoos.
Stop.
Did you get one for second place? No, I never had a tattoo for second place. That's not good enough. But the point being is that that mindset of going to home, being at home. I mean, okay, Italy's home, and Mugello and Misano might be the ones, but he's under pressure there. It's the place where he's got to perform. He's on an Italian bike. He's under the whole team permeates a bit of pressure when you're in Italy. Come to Asen, the slightly more laid back Dutch, when it comes to sort of, the atmosphere around, the fact that you've ridden the track before, the fact that the track is so incredible in places. I mean, it really is. It's okay. I was perhaps a bit disrespectful to it a bit earlier on. I even have Julian Ryder bought me a present, and it's a bit of the old track, the tarmac, in a frame with the shape of the Asen track, a bit like Pecco's tattoo, which is in my bathroom. So I see it every morning. I have a little reminder of Asen every single morning.
Where'd you get a piece of the Asen circuit from?
When they dug it all up, when they dug the main track up, which I would have raced on, some enterprising fellow got a few scoop loads of the stuff. And so the actual tarmac that was there, I'm sure he did it with permission. I can't remember exactly what Julian said, and Julian would be the man to check out on that. So at Jules MotoGP, if you fancy catching him in Twitter to find out where this stuff came from. But he bought me this present of a frame with the old track in it and the shape of the track in it as well, which Jules, he's a wonderful man, Julian. And we are going to have him back on, by the way, on OMG MotoGP. There's been a lot of push for Jules to come on, and I spoke to him this week, and he's definitely coming back on with us. But he has such a wonderful personality, Jules. My daughters, I mean, you'll be fresh with this because of your kids there. Thank you, Lila, for having a lay down.
Literally keep an eye on the babe camera.
Yeah, but the point being is that Jules would buy my daughters when they were very young, a tin toy or something like that. Completely, he's got such a big heart, Julian has. He really has. Love him to bits. But and he'll buy me a present sometimes as well. I only buy him beer, and that's rare.
I wouldn't be upset with a beer at this point. So back to the championship chat. We've obviously got.
I think Pecco's got it nailed, Amy.
I
think that this is the point where he gets a grip on it. I think Asen, to your question, I think that those 18 points, suddenly Jorge's on the back foot a little bit, in that, oh my God, he's closing me down. And he is, cue Jaws music, he is the kind of guy, isn't he, banging on? We've seen him do it before. And he's about to do it again, I reckon. And if he can nail it down in Asen, that puts a lot of pressure on Jorge Martin.
When I hear the Jaws music in my head, there's actually only one person that I think of, and it isn't Jorge Martin, and it isn't Pecco Bagnaia, it's Marc Marquez, because he's still technically chasing his first Grand Prix win on a Ducati. He's 35 points behind Jorge Martin in the championship. It, for me, isn't a case of if, it's a case of when.
And I think it's this weekend.
Hold on a minute. Did you not just say this is where Pecco is about to take off?
Yeah,
there can't be two winners unless you can.
No, I think you can, because we've got two races. I think Bagnaia on the big points.
Okay.
He's the guy that works out the big points really, really well. But I think the sprint race, I think Mark's going to be there. So you can have two winners.
Oh, you technically can. Okay, hold on. That's a kind of a good cue to ask for your predictions for this weekend. So who have you got in your top three for the sprint?
I think for the sprint, I'll go with Marc Marquez for the win. I think he's going to be there or thereabouts. Jorge Martin and Bezzecchi.
I thought you were going to go Vinales. I literally thought Vinales was going to be on your lips.
No. I mean, he is on my list, but I'm kind of willing Bezzecchi now to have got that deal nailed down. And he needs a bit of a comeback, doesn't he? And Asen's a place for him. He was absolutely outstanding there last year. Let's see if the stable contract situation and the Asen combination work for Bezzecchi. So I'll have him as a third place man in the sprint.
And in your main race?
Oh, Bagnaia for the win, definitely. I struggle a bit with this. It's one of them ones where I wonder if a Leish can do what he did last year. I feel like I ought to have an Leish or a Maverick in there. You're right, but okay, I'll go with a Leish for a second place. Blimey, I'm all over the hockey with this, aren't I? And Marc Marquez third.
I actually don't think... the only thing I'd switch is I'd probably have Maverick Vinales second in my main race.
I think there's going to be a lot of pushing and shoving.
Yeah.
So therefore, I haven't got confidence in Maverick in a push and shove still, I'm afraid.
I just think, like you said and touched on about the kind of announcement news, Maverick Vinales is definitely one of those riders who tends to, when he's off to a new team for a couple races following it, he tends to really shine and show what he can do. So we shall see what happens and what transpires this weekend. But this is a gentle reminder to please do subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcast from. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, do make sure you head on over and subscribe to us on there. And for more information on our YouTube memberships and Patreon memberships, where you can get early access to podcasts and all other kind of members benefits, then check out the links below. But Keith and I will be back on Monday with your Asen review alongside Jack Appleyard, who was really good. He brought good chat, didn't he, the last time Jack was on, Keith?
I think that sometimes we need a contrast in age, and so having Jack on suits me just perfect. No, we don't. I don't include you in that at all. I'm not even going there.
I was about to say, where are you pitching me in this age list?
No, you're definitely in the young department. There's no way that I'm making comparisons with myself on that one. Well, I get into trouble for tripping you up if I speak over you. I get an absolute slating for it.
I felt bad for you for that one, and the only reason I didn't like say back and say, hey, it's fine. It's like it's difficult on this thing is because I don't actually have an account and I can't you have to have an account to comment back. But just for everybody listening, I do forgive Keith if he interrupts me. It's not on purpose. But I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to coming back on Monday anyway, Keith, and have a bit of racing action to talk about. It feels like it's been far too long, but luckily we've had lots of news to keep us going. But Monday, we'll have a race to talk about. Keith and I will be back, and we will be joined by Jack Appleyard. We'll see you then.